have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
About a week after it's been announced that COVID became a pandemic, my dad started to have these symptoms, very flu-like, and we thought, maybe it's just the flu, maybe not. But you can tell that he's getting sick all of a sudden. In my head, while texting back my family, I'm like, honestly, I feel like it might be COVID, but deep down, I'm like, no, it can't be. Like having this, just feeling, I felt like I was denying things, hoping it's not real, that my dad isn't one of those people who has caught COVID. It just happens to be the season of flu, since it was flu season back then. And all I know is that my dad's symptoms have gotten worse, not just coughing, but just having difficulties like what we heard in the beginning of the pandemic is harder breathing, fever-like symptoms, coughing and so forth, nausea, lack of appetite, things like that. He got his swab taken care of, and from there we got a call, all of us individually, got a call from public health here in Peel region where I live, that my dad actually is positive for COVID-19. So by the time I got home, I went straight to each of my family members, so my brother and my mother, asking them, hey, did you hear? Did public health call you by any chance? What did they say to you? How is dad and everything else? But this whole time you can just hear my dad just wheezing in the house. You can just hear it from the walls and the doors that's been shut. Even just opening the door, I can just see little glimpses of my dad looking sick. You can just see how he feels miserable about himself, trying to cope with it, understanding like everything is okay. He's trying to be strong in front of our eyes, but we knew that he is dealing with this. I made the decision, talked to my mom saying, I think just to have a peace of mind, it's best for my dad to be in the hospital. He will get the extra care. There was more equipment there, more medical attention that he could attain compared to being at home. Because in my head, if anything were to come worse, I feel like it would just be more devastating to see possibly a dad passing away in the middle of the night, and us seeing it ourselves with no real medical background. So made the call, told my dad, get ready, bring whatever you need. We are gonna call the ambulance and you're gonna head to the hospital. So he said, okay. By the time we were waiting and for them to come, fire department came. This was around 9 p.m. They came full on PPE, finding which house it was because it was quite dark. But I was just waiting outside the front, made sure that they can notice us, that we were right there waiting for them, as we were also waiting for the ambulance. So I talked to the fire department, quickly told them, hey, just like, again, this is a COVID patient. And I said, is there a possibility for him to go to the hospital? They said they weren't sure themselves. They have to see what the paramedics will say. In my head, I was like, what do you mean you're not sure? Like, this is a COVID patient. We know what happens with COVID patients if it does get worse, and it seems like my dad's symptoms were getting worse. My dad's blood pressure, oxygen level was low enough that they can take him to the hospital. So we were really relieved, also worried about that as well, but we were just happy that he's able to go to the hospital and just get all the care that he needs compared to just staying at home. The next morning, I get woken up by just hearing multiple knocks on the door. And I'm like, who can that be at this time? It's early morning. Why would someone knock? No one knocks at the door unless they ring the bell or they call someone. So I checked out the window and noticed that there is a police car in front of my neighbor's house. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's for us. There's no possible way it can be for anyone else, especially after last night, making all the attention. So I go downstairs, tell my family, hey, just let you know, there's police officers, I'm going to check it out. And I come out, I call out at the police officers and say, hey, are you looking for me? And they're like, are you related to Ronaldo David, or like the David family? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. So they told me, just bring a family. We'd like to talk to you. I'm like, okay. Go upstairs quickly, wake them up, tell them, hey, the police officer here, they want to talk to us. And they're just half asleep, but they're like, okay. Once we all settled in, sitting down, and they were just standing at the front foyer, all they said was, your dad is unconscious, but alive. And we're like, excuse me? Did we hear that right? My dad is unconscious, but alive. So what did that mean? Like, we're all devastated. Like, we don't know what to say. Like, is he like half dead or something? Or like anything like that? Like, he's just on a ventilator waiting for us to say, okay, you can pull out the plug or something. Like, what's going on? Like, that's all they said. They've told us, here's the number. Call the social worker and tell them who you are, and they'll explain the rest to us. They left, we closed the door, and we were just in complete shock. All we could do was just come together just as a family, still distancing, and just go on our knees, and each of us just prayed, because that's all we could do. Like, it was overwhelming the past 8 to 10 hours since my dad left the house and was admitted. By the time we had this conversation with the social worker, they explained that he was in need for a ventilator because they found out through the chest x-ray that his lungs were failing, and basically it's known as respiratory failure, and that he needed the ventilator for him to survive and do all the treatments that they can do. The pain of having a ventilator is too much that's where the unconscious came along, from that statement from the police officer that he was in an induced coma, but he's still taken care of. Then a few days later, after the whole event about my dad, and hearing and just being the person who is in constant contact with nurses and doctors, with the reports of my dad's stats, my mom ended up becoming positive for COVID. So it was stressful because not only is my dad in the ICU being taken care of, note that he had no pre-health conditions, and now my mom has it. But the thing is, she has pre-health conditions, which for her it was diabetes. And just knowing that, it was very stressful to add onto all of our mindsets, knowing that my mom has it. But praise the Lord, it wasn't as worse as my dad. And so now she's isolating herself in her room, and everything, all the responsibility from food to the home to the hospital reports, will still onto my brother and I's shoulders. But then a few days after my brother got positive results of COVID. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what is going on? This virus, no matter how much we socially distance with each other, how much we try to stay away and just be in our own rooms, somehow the virus just keeps crawling underneath our door somehow and gets to each and every single one of us. And all the responsibility is all on me. And I felt overwhelmed, didn't know what to do, stuck in my room, a plain wall between everything. I felt like I was in jail. There was no one to lean on, because I was used to leaning on my fiance, who's usually someone I see often, or to my brother, or to my mom, to my dad, but literally no one was there. So it was very hard. And then a few days after that, the virus got to me, the least exposed person in this house. Fortunately, my conditions were mild since I was the least exposed, but I still would cough a lot, trying to get a breath of air, fresh air. I would feel nauseous, and I had lack of appetite a lot. I knew I had to eat because it's best for my body to rest with all the nutrition, but at the same time, every time I would eat and try something, I just wanted to puke out. The smell of food was just made me feel disgusted and just didn't want to have anything but water, which was not good to have. And to help with my body, 2 days after that, we get a call. We thought everything was okay with my dad.
Well, that 58-year-old man, believed to be the first healthcare worker in Ontario to die from COVID-19, has actually worked at Brampton Civic Hospital since it opened in 2007. Now, his family does not want his name released, but the flag was lowered to half-mast today outside the hospital. They are telling me he was a loving husband and father to 2 grown children. Just last year, he renewed his vows with his wife of 23 years. He loved having conversations with patients at the hospital. He also loved his church, singing, gardening, and his pastor said he was a mentor to many of the youth at the church.
During this time, he had a lot of moments where everything went low. We thought was the lowest for my dad, where he was close to his deathbed, to him having some hope of him getting better and stable. So now suddenly to this call from the doctor and hearing all the reports that something to do with his blood culture. Unfortunately, he passed away due to COVID and all the secondary symptoms that came with it. From respiratory failure to kidney failure, all of a sudden having from 16 hours of dialysis to now being stable with the regular one, to now this mysterious infection in the blood from COVID. It was a shocker. All of us were speechless when the doctor has told us through the phone about it. All we were doing was sitting in the hallway, distancing, and just hearing the news from the doctor that my dad passed away. All we could do is literally mourn in our own little bubble. We couldn't hug each other because we had the physical touch of love to comfort each other. But we couldn't do that because we still had COVID in each other. We had this fear, like, if we touch each other, like, will it get worse? We didn't know what to do but to stay in our own rooms after that and just mourn, do whatever it may be. We haven't seen our dad physically since he left the house to go to the hospital. All we saw was a couple of FaceTime calls of just seeing him with all the tubes in his mouth, all of the machines that are around inside the room, to even outside where they have to change everything up. At that point, my mom kind of recovered, as well as my brother, who followed along, recovered from COVID. I was the only one left who was dealing with COVID in my system. I hated every single moment of it, even in my sleep, because I wanted to get out. Like, I actually did felt like I was a prisoner trying to find an escape route. But at that time, knowing that I've studied therapy, more particularly into recreation therapy, I knew there was benefits of doing recreation-related activities, things I can do to help cope for myself, to keep myself sane, especially being at home by myself and coping everything that was happening. So for myself, during these times of waiting for a negative result, I did painting, a lot of painting. I did a 5-piece painting of an engagement photo of myself and Jed. So it became a huge piece I did for my room to take most of the space of my plain room, to other nature-related things that made me calm and reflect on the beauty of nature and God's creation. Despite COVID, despite everything that's happening, I just have to be still because God is in control of it all. And even though I am an emotional wreck through everything, even for my family, God is still there, that He can stop the storm and for us to see the blessings and the path that He has for us, like the parting of the Red Sea. From one side of us there, we can see the promised land to the next. And so, in a total of 2.5, 3 months of being positive with COVID through it all, after dying of social interaction outside of my family, dying to see my fiance, I finally got a negative result, and I was ecstatic. Even just hearing it is just amazing, because it's like going to the next stepping stone of life, or I would say life's obstacles, because I can move forward. The last person who can move forward through all this and at least not stay still or just keep running on a non-ending treadmill. And so I was happy. I can finally leave the house. I can go hiking, because that was the one thing I loved about being outside, was hiking, because you can just get the fresh air, especially get the fresh air, see the beauty of what God has created, and just enjoying every single moment outside. Things were starting to get better. We had a funeral, a 3-day funeral for my dad, virtually. We were able to later on do a actual in-person outdoor funeral for my dad to give another closure. Unfortunately, we still weren't able to see him, but that's because the moment the funeral home picked up my dad back then, they had to cremate him. It's outside of the tradition that my family is used to. So we weren't still able to see him, but at least we had the chance to really touch the vase that had the remainings of my dad cremated, and to do an actual final funeral for my dad with just the selective close family from Scarborough, as well as myself, as well as the church pastor and elder. Sometimes I forget how fresh it is, because my mind, I guess it's a defense mechanism that he's still gone in the Philippines, even though personally I've been trying to accept it myself, that he's just peacefully resting, waiting for God to call him out and just come home, and we'll see him soon. I wanted to do something not just for myself but for others, because it's like the act of service is just running in my blood, and it's like I just stopped the blood flow and it's just bulking up somewhere inside of me. So I decided to maybe finally visit one of the Compassion Ministries events that they've been doing online. I've seen and heard how they've been talking through our group chat, planning everything. I'm kind of missing the excitement of all these event plans. Compassion Ministry, under the Adventist Youth Ontario Department of the Ontario Conference, mouthful. But Compassion Ministry is essentially an organization founded from the States, from another Adventist. But essentially it is being the hands, eyes, heart, and feet of Christ. We are essentially a group of Adventist friends who is empowering youth and young adults to reach out to the community in whatever the needs may be. It can go in many ways. There's a lot of outlets we can do, whether it's virtual, whether it's outreaches, whether it's through prayer. But essentially it's to meet the needs of the people who need it the most. And so after listening to one of the events, I'm like, yeah, this was the last piece I was missing. I knew something was up, but here it is. I was ready to take this new ministry of a new unique one personally, where I knew how COVID affected me, and I knew the pandemic is still happening. So why not take that step, not just to help me therapeutically to accept things, but to also help people? Because even though I'm dealing with this now and it being fresh, doesn't mean the world and the community itself isn't feeling that as well, whether it's directly or indirectly. And since then, that's been burning inside of me, and using compassion ministry as an outlet to help others. We heard that a place in downtown Toronto had a huge population of homeless people, more particularly congregating in a public park. I call it Tent City because one side of the park had tents side by side, and we knew that we need to reach out to them despite all the hardships, because I'm sure despite of COVID, they're having their own hardships too. And we gave them warm food, donated clothes from multiple church donations, individual donations from church, as well as those who are still working were able to get donations from their workplace. So we were very grateful for the donations, especially during this cold time living in Canada. It's not easy to be homeless and living in a winter-like country. And it's helped me empower myself to do the same to every single place I've been to. So for example, I've been back to work at my original workplace in Mississauga. I work in a nursing home. I am a recreational therapist assistant, which is what I've studied and love to do. So I'm able to be in contact and be close to the elderly and staff. And during this time of COVID, it is difficult because they cannot see their family. And so for them, they are socially isolated despite being able to communicate with other elderlies who live in that same unit and building in total. And so I knew how they felt in a different way, of course, but I knew that I can be another source of light and love. Those who found out that my dad has passed away, they always ask me, why do I still have a smile? And with that simple question, I was able to use it as a ministry to say, you know, despite everything and sharing my story, God is pretty much with me and able to help me cope through it, and to talk about the relations of COVID and the story that I have for myself. No one has dealt with COVID before. No one knows how to talk about it and how to minister with it. So I find and use my experiences and what I felt as a ministry as someone, sharing how I've dealt with it, talk about the experiences, the negative effects to it, how you can be resilient, a place where I can be an outlet to someone, just to be a listening ear, but those who dealt with it, because the best people to minister to a certain group is to actually experience it yourself. We know the devil is trying every aspect possible to bring us down again. We know that he has a strong line, a strong attack that he can use, knowing that he could have used COVID and the traumas I have to put me down and be back to my room of fear, to anxiety and depression that I've dealt with again, and just keep those rounds going. But God is there with me. He's brought all the people I need so far to help me be strong. He's shown me so many ways to know that I'm not alone, that I can power through and be successful to defend my own self through anxiety, through depression, through the trauma I've gotten of COVID. So I praise God for all he has done despite everything that's happened.